Hey, I'm Zug Warrior, and welcome to Kerbal Space Program. We're gonna try and reach for the stars with a completely new game. So let's go with Zug Warrior, and we're gonna do this as a career game. So let's see if we can make this. We're gonna actually end up having to start with some very small, basic experiments to build up our science, so we can actually research and build larger rockets to eventually reach into space. For those of you that haven't played before, Kerbal Space Program is, well, it's a space sim, but you go all the way from building your rockets to actually piloting through the solar system. And the solar system is actually quite massive. I'll actually show you by going over here to the tracking station. But, because you have Kerbal itself, which is the equivalent of Earth, then you have the moon, and then Mimas, which is the smaller moon. And as you slowly go further out, you can see the actual orbit trajectory of Kerbal, and there's so many planets to explore. One of the things I really enjoy about this is, just as many kids that grew up in the late 80s, early 90s, space has just fascinated me for the entirety of my life. You know, wanting to be an astronaut and everything. Uh, so this is kind of your ability to live that fantasy. Um, so let's actually go through and make our first manned vessel. Because right now we haven't even researched being able to make drones or probes or anything. So we're going to start with this Mark 1 command pod. This holds one little Kerbal in it, and if you actually look, it's very reminiscent of some of the early command pods that NASA used. Now, we need a way to recover this. So we're actually going to add this Mark 16 parachute. Now, while we're actually up in the sky, we're going to have these stages over here. Now, each stage can be split up to pretty much any of the activatables, like be it engines or decouplers, which are actually what you'll see in actual rockets when they launch, when you have the main stage that lifts it off the ground, and it has that driving power and a long burn to be able to push through the thick atmosphere. But as soon as you get it higher up and you can work with a more efficient engine, you want to drop that weight, or else you're not going to be able to lift completely out of atmo. So you have decouplers, which will actually split and drop that previous part. So this is actually going to be our last stage, is going to be this popping up. But as you can see, we don't have a whole lot of tech to deal with here, really. Not a whole lot of parts. We have one basic solid engine. So instead of actually being a low atmo, or sorry, not low atmo, but like a low orbit test or anything like that, this is actually going to be just a concept test of, can we create something to be able to lift off the ground. You also have science parts, which are going to be your experiments that you can run. Now, just being able to recover a craft that has gone someplace will warrant scientific data, but what we want is to actually be able to run experiments, because if we're able to run these experiments, we can get more data, which in game terms means more science points, and those science points are actually going to let us unlock better parts. So let's actually throw on these Mystery U containers, but since this is a very physics-heavy game, a lot of the physics make an amount of sense. So what we need to do is we actually need to balance these. So we're going to go down to the symmetry mode, and we'll actually throw 2 of these on, hoping that this does not unbalance us to the point that we lose our Kerbal. I'm actually going to slap them up here on the pod itself, on the command pod, because if we come in too hot, this part may get destroyed, but the command pod may survive, and I want that data. I want to be able to bring back that data. So let's call this Test Pod 1. It's a good creative name. Test Pod Mark 1. Now we can go through and let's actually save this. And let's take this out. Let's launch her and see how it goes. So here's our busted ass rocket pad. Uh, as you can tell, we're very early in the Kerbal Space Program's development. We've got not the game itself, but my Kerbal Space Agency. Let's see. So what we're gonna do is we actually see. I should have done this in the rocket construction area, because right now, if I were to trigger this first stage, it would pop both the parachute and the solid rocket. So let's actually drop the solid rocket down here. So it'll launch on its own, and then we can trigger the parachute after it's burned through its fuel. The biggest thing right now is we don't have an actual control on this thrust, because the way solid rockets work is they are ignited and they just burn through the fuel until they're done. There's no controlling the fuel flow. There's no adjusting the thrust or anything. So he is basically riding a bottle rocket as high as he can get, and then hopefully popping the parachute and surviving. So let's do it. It's getting massive altitude super quickly. You can actually tell down here in the navigation ball that it's relatively stable. Like, I am not being pulled in any direction. I've gone pretty much straight up. And now let's just coast this out. And since we're starting to reach the top of our arc, let's actually get in here and observe and see what the hell is this mystery goo doing. Oh, it jiggles and wobbles as it flies. Okay, let's keep that data. And let's get a report from the crew, because each of these things will warrant science. So he's looking inviting, and you know, it's a beautiful coastline. Now we just hit the top of our thing, and we're dropping like a stone. Now we're starting to nose over, because the top is actually heavier, because since this is out of fuel, the command module along with the goo is much heavier. So what we're actually going to do is, once we drop probably another 1,000, I'm going to pop this parachute and hope that it slows us down enough to be able to not hit too hard, because we want to bring Jebediah home. Jebediah he's been good for the program. Okay, so we've popped it out. You can see a little bit of clipping, but I mean, the physics are still there. It's still dragging us down. It's still slowing us down. Like, we're slowing down our speed a little bit, and it just fully opened, and it's gonna whip us around, and we've almost slowed to a crawl. I mean, I guess I could have cut it a little bit closer and maybe popped at 3,900 feet, but I would rather go for this safe, like 15 to 20 second drift down, just because we don't want to lose Jebediah. Jebediah, he's our first test pilot. He's made it the highest that any Kerbal's been, and it lands safely. So what we do from here is, since we've landed safely, we're within recovery distance, we're actually going to go to our world's first milestones. See, these are some of the milestones that we've broken just on this test flight. You know, we broke of speed, we built our first vehicle, we went as high as we've ever gone, faster. So we've done well. What we're gonna do now is we're actually gonna exit out of here and go to the Space Center, because that's going to actually be persistent and sit there in the game until, see, you actually test pod Mark 1 sitting right over there. We traveled what, like 50 meters away? So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go into the Space Center, and we are going to find our pod here, and it brings it up over here on the left, and we're actually going to recover it. Now, recovering it's going to bring both the Kerbal and the craft back in, and we're going to be able to get all this sweet, delicious science. So we got the crew report, the mystery goo, recovering it from that survived the flight. We were able to recover all of the parts, which is one of the nice things of keeping everything together. And later on, when we actually start having multi-stage rockets, we're going to want to slap parachutes onto our boosters that we drop away, because the more of them that we recover, the more funds we're going to have. It's going to make it as cheap as possible to be able to actually launch it. So we recovered that. Now let's back out of here and let's check out more of the actual launch facility. So as we've looked before, this is the tracking station. This is the vehicle assembly building. Now over here is the space plane hangar. So if you're wanting to actually build normal aircraft, once you get the parts, because the parts are not independent of each other, we have the exact same parts unlocked over here. You can actually build a space plane for either just Atmo travel, or slap some boosters on it and you may be able to actually break Atmo and kind of fly around in a low orbit. Now backing out again, we've got a couple other facilities we got to check out over here. So this is the astronaut complex. This is where all of your guys are going to be housed. These are our applicants. Each of them costs an amount of money to hire. And then these are our current Kerbalnauts. They're all available for the next mission. Each one of them has their role. So, stability assist because this guy's a pilot. Engineers are capable of repairing broken parts if it's possible. Scientists can boost the value of data from science experiments. Now, as it is, I would like to send pilots up with these first couple of craft, because that stabilization, it will help a lot during launch. Because as bad as that wobble can get in the early launch, it throws off everything after that. Like if you're trying to do a gravity turn when you're launching straight up and then turning over when you have to use the gravity to help that it's in gravity assisted turn, it's the most efficient way to actually break atmosphere. But if you're having to deal with a wobble while you're going up, it's going to burn a lot more fuel. You're going to have less delta V. You're not going to be able to complete your mission unless you've added a lot of extra fuel, which makes the entire endeavor less efficient, and it doesn't really give you a much larger narrow for margin of error. So we have the admin building over here. This is where you start making decisions that affect the entirety of your agency. Each one of these will cost an amount of funds to change the way everything works. So like outsourced R&D, basically it's going to give up 5% of my income, and it yields 1 science for every 12,000 Kerbal bucks, which later on may be useful, but since we're super early, I'm more a fan of just earning it ourselves. Then we have research and development. This is going to be our bread and butter, our happy place to be, because each one of these is actually going to unlock more parts for our exploration. Like engineering right here, it gives us the Science Junior, which is another device that will allow us to get more science. Later on, you can use communication systems to either remotely control craft or to actually transmit data back. So if we wanted to, we could put together a rover, send it to the moon, and have it send back data. And the stack decouplers, we talked about those a little bit earlier. Those are what allow you to actually split away expended engines, or in the case if we actually want to get around to building a space station, you can use decouplers to actually take the craft up there and then decouple the section of the space station you took up there to leave it there. It's a lot more involved. There's docking and everything, which is a huge headache early on. We can also take basic rocketry, which will give us a better solid fuel booster, and it'll actually give us fuel tanks, so we can start using a actual controlled engine. Right now we're sitting on 21 science, so we can actually snag up both of these. Let's look and see what these are. These are 20, 18, and that I don't have access to yet. So let's actually just knock out these first couple, and let's probably what survivability got here. We got a heat shield, which is back in the day actually keeping your craft cool when you were going through Atmo wasn't a thing. You didn't have to do it. But now they've added it, so we actually need to worry about not letting things get sheared off by the heat and the force. Let's actually throw up another little pod and see what we can do. Jebediah has done good, so we'll send him up again. Yeah, we got Jebediah. Actually, let's spread the love. Valentina, why don't you come on over? And so we've got a little bit more options that we can do. So let's try and get a little bit higher this time. I'm kind of doing this by the seat of my pants right now, instead of planning this out and just trying to go off of like some memory. So let's actually slap some of this stuff on, and we're just gonna do a rough little pod here. And let's actually add a couple. I think 3's enough. Oh, but we'll still be having, because we don't have radials yet, do we? Oh. No, we could do, though. Let's throw on a decoupler down here. And then at the bottom of this, we'll actually attach the hammer solid booster. So as you can see over here in staging, we're going to launch the booster first, then decouple, and then ignite the controlled engine, and then decouple for this to come off on top. Well, we need that person to survive, so let's actually throw on the parachute. Do we want to? Yeah, let's throw on a Science Junior as well. We'll see what we can actually get away with bringing back. And then, as always, I like to throw on some of these the goos every bit higher we go. Okay, now so the craft building section actually has a lot of really cool tools. So we check out where the center of mass is, and make sure it's centered in our craft and everything. And then the center of thrust, which is exactly where it needs to be. And then the center of lift should be right on. Well, they changed it. It used to just show you. But let's actually stabilize this, because in all actuality, that is going to be the best of the lot. So let's throw in some basic fins, because that'll give us a little bit more stability. And then I think that's good. Oh, that's actually going to give us a spin. You can do angle snaps, which makes sure that everything stays perfectly straight. Because if you notice when we threw on those last ones, they were a little bit angled and we would have had a spin going up. So let's, whoa. Let's not accidentally click on stuff through screens. So let's actually call this the, let's go, high Atmo test craft. Alright. So it looks pretty good. Let's get her launched. Let's get her done. Okay, let's I actually want to add. I'd rather this decouple not go as soon as that parachute, but let's see. Okay, so we have our pilot. Cross your fingers. Hope we make it. Okay, so far we're doing relatively good, straight up, clear shot. We're not really varying too far from our initial trajectory, which is super important. And we're about halfway through fuel. We're starting to get a little bit of a wobble. As you notice, we're actually drifting off a little bit. We're going to drop that and ignite this next one. Oh no! Everything's gone tits up! That's what happens when you forget the buttons. If I can just... Whoa, I kind of want like... So this is a situation where... Oh, we want to go exactly opposite of the ground. So you notice these icons on our nav wheel actually show us the direction that we are going, or that our thrust is, I should say. Okay, so we're starting to actually lean over. We're killing our thrust. So let's actually get this observations done, because if you notice, we're actually fairly high up in the atmosphere. So these should actually be full of good data. That seems like it's pretty piss poor data, actually. Let's see what she thinks. So I'm not actually high enough to be considered a high atmosphere, so we may have to take this one back to the drawing board. But this is a view not many Kerbals have seen. Got a little bit of extra science. The bad thing is we're going to lose both those because I don't have radial parachutes yet. Once I'm able to get some radial parachutes, will I be able to recover that and it won't just be lost funds? Oh, but we have a red indicator here. Kind of that was it hitting the ground. Kind of terrified by what that red indicator means. I wonder if we actually got too high too fast and it's damaged. Oh, Jesus. Valentina, I apologize. This is gonna hit. Oh no, is it just too high? There it is. Whew. Okay, I was actually spooking myself because I was too high in the atmosphere. Jesus Christ. Sorry about that. That scared the Jesus out of me. So I was actually just too high in the atmosphere for the parachute to be deployed and it to actually have any effect. Or I was falling too fast and I needed to bleed off speed by hitting thicker atmosphere. Either way, it was unable to be deployed. But that was a pretty successful second test. We were actually able to, what was our new thing? Oh! So, here's the bad thing about that. I wasn't going slow enough when I hit the ground. So we lost that science experiment. It's rough, because that was basically a completely botched launch, and our rewards from it are going to be pretty minimal. Because we got basically nothing from that. We recovered a little bit of monopropellant and the parachute in the command pod. So all in all, that was a complete wash. We got her a little bit more experience, which is nice, but all in all, it wasn't worth the trip. So we'll continue testing. We'll continue working our way through this career mode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Hit it up with a like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Catch you cats later.